My parents never wanted me, so they bought me a broken car, hoping I would crash and they would never have to see me again. But instead, they lost both their sons. Growing up, the favoritism toward my older brother was painfully obvious. He was 20 and had always been their golden child. When he turned 18, he got a car. It was not new, but a 20-year-old Lexus in great condition. He never let me forget it for the rest of his senior year. I worked just as hard as he did. I got the same grades, sometimes even better. I volunteered to clean up trash in my community. I pushed myself, hoping that maybe my effort would be recognized. But when my 18th birthday came a few weeks ago, it was clear nothing had changed. All I wanted was a car. I did not expect anything fancy, just something reliable, like my brother got, but my birthday was nothing like his. When he turned 18, my mom baked him a homemade layered chocolate pudding cake. For me, they picked up a basic sheet cake from the supermarket. He had a DJ at his party. I got my dad's old boombox with a couple of mixed CDs. As the party went on, I kept waiting, thinking maybe they had a surprise for me. But nothing happened when things were winding down. I finally asked why I did not get a car like my brother did. They told me they felt like he worked harder for it. I asked what he did that I hadn't, because I had done everything and more. My grandma overheard and stepped in. She asked them the same question. Then in front of everyone, she called them out for playing favorites. She pointed out how much effort they put into my brother's 18th birthday compared to mine. My uncle was the first to speak up. Then more relatives joined. And I could not handle it anymore, so I walked away to my room. Later, I got calls from family members apologizing. My grandparents took me out for the evening to cheer me up, but when I got back, my parents were furious. They said I had humiliated them in front of everyone. I did not argue, I just walked past them. The next few weeks were filled with silence. Then out of nowhere, my parents threw me a set of car keys and a title with a simple, "Have fun." It was a white '98 Subaru Legacy. It ran well, and they even paid for 6 months of insurance, just like they did for my brother. I know a car is a privilege, not a right, but it felt like I had blackmailed them into giving me one. 5 months later, I had not logged into this account in a while, but now I can finally tell the rest before college starts. First, I need to address something from the comments. In my last post, I needed a car. It was not about being spoiled. There was no public transportation where I lived, and without a car, I had no way to get a job. So to the people who told me to return it or just accept life being unfair, please stop. My inbox was full of messages saying, I should not take gifts from bad parents, but none of that matters anymore because things took a turn. I did get a part-time job that later became full-time for the summer. After graduation, but 3 weeks into working, the Subaru's head gasket blew while I was on the highway at 45 miles per hour. The temperature gauge shot up. I pulled over and called for help. My grandparents checked the car and found someone had stuffed it full of gasket sealer. It was a temporary fix to keep the engine running long enough to sell it. The car had been falling apart before my parents even bought it. I had never pushed it hard since I was a careful driver, but it did not matter. My parents claimed they had no idea, but their only reaction was to shrug and say it was karma for making them buy me a car. That was a mistake because my grandparents heard them say it and they were furious. My grandma told me to wait in my room while they handled it. 2 hours later, I was called back to the living room. My parents sat on the couch looking completely defeated. My uncle and a few other relatives were there too. My grandparents got my parents to admit they had bought the cheapest running car they could find without checking anything. They did not inspect it or even read the ad properly. My uncle, who knows about cars, said the engine was beyond saving. The damage from the warped head gasket meant rebuilding. It would cost more than the car itself. I had to call my job and tell them I could not come in because my car was dead. They understood and put me on unpaid leave for the moment. I had no idea what would happen next. My grandparents told me to stay out of it and let them handle it. A few days later, they showed up with a '99 Honda Civic hatchback. It had 180,000 miles but ran perfectly. It was white like my Subaru but more reliable and got better gas mileage. It even came with a list of all the recent repairs, including a new radiator. My uncle checked it over before giving his approval. I thanked everyone over and over, but my parents were not happy. They barely said a word and walked away. This time they did not even have the attitude of giving a bratty kid a toy. They just looked like they had lost something important. We later sold the Subaru for $400 since that was the best offer we could get. That money went into my savings. That was just half of what happened. The other half was about school. See, I was not lying when I said I did better than my brother. He got a 30% scholarship after high school. I got a 50% scholarship at a college just as good, but closer to home. When my parents found out, they were shocked. That shock quickly turned into something else. They looked upset, but said nothing. I did not ask them about it because I did not want to start a fight, but my grandma did. She decided to poke the bear, and my grandma really poked the bear. She asked my parents if they were happy for me. They claimed they were, but their attitude said otherwise. My grandparents finally asked them the hard questions. Why did they dislike me? Why couldn't they be proud of their second son when I was doing so well? Even exceeding expectations? Did they want me to fail? Were they hoping for it? What was their deal? My mom looked upset, and my dad couldn't even look me in the eyes. They meekly said they were happy for me and wanted me to take the world by storm when I went to college. They even said they would help pay some of my tuition, just like they had for my brother. My grandparents were sharp in their response. They told my parents they had better keep their word because showing favoritism had already done enough damage. I thanked my parents for their offer, but the whole thing felt so forced. My dad gave me a limp handshake, and my mom gave me a stiff hug. It didn't feel genuine. I was, and still am, thankful for the car and their help with tuition, but the way they drained every bit of emotion out of the moment stuck with me. I couldn't help but wonder why my parents had treated me the way they did. So I asked my grandparents. I wanted to know if I had been an accidental pregnancy or something like that. They exchanged a look, the kind that says, "It's time we told you." It turns out I wasn't adopted like many people online had guessed, but I was unplanned. My parents wanted 2 kids, a boy and a girl. My brother came first, and he was the boy they wanted. They were convinced their second child would be a girl. They even refused to find out my gender during the pregnancy because they were so sure. They bought loads of baby stuff for a girl, but then I was born. My grandma explained that my parents had no idea what to do. They were disappointed from the moment I came into the world. I ended up wearing my brother's hand-me-downs until I was 3 years old because they couldn't use the girl items they'd purchased. My grandparents said my parents were so caught up in what they didn't get that they failed to appreciate what they did have. According to my grandparents, my parents have always been this way. They've been like this for so long that expecting them to change would be pointless. Since that conversation, my parents have avoided talking about college. They ignore the subject as much as they can. Some people online warned me about potential sabotage, so I took extra precautions. I called the college I'd been accepted to and told them to verify everything with me if anyone tried to say I wasn't attending or if my parents pretended to act on my behalf. I doubted my parents would go that far, but I felt it was better to be safe than sorry. Then something unexpected happened. My brother called me out of the blue. He said our grandparents had filled him in on everything. He apologized in his own way and told me he hoped I wouldn't have to come back here once I was on my own. He admitted that when he finished college, he wasn't planning to return either. He liked the state he was in and had no intention of moving back home. I told him I didn't blame him and that I might do the same. The conversation felt awkward because we hadn't spoken much in years, but it was nice to reconnect. A few weeks later, my grandparents and the rest of the family surprised me with a party. They made it almost identical to my brother's 18th birthday. There was a DJ and my grandma baked a big chocolate cake. I was overwhelmed by their kindness and couldn't thank them enough. My parents attended the party, but they sat at a far table in the corner and kept to themselves. They barely spoke to anyone and just drank quietly. They looked completely defeated. I think the party wasn't just to celebrate me. It was also a way for the family to send my parents a message about how they had failed. My grandma summed it up perfectly. You're never too old to be taught a lesson in humility. In the months leading up to college, I worked hard at my full-time job to save as much as possible. The pay wasn't great. It was minimum wage, but it was something. I wanted to leave the job on a high note, so I gave it my all until my 2 weeks' notice. I didn't expect to be back here writing another update 2 years later, but here I am. For those who remember, I was the guy whose parents showed blatant favoritism toward his older brother and who later found out that their disappointment in me started the moment I was born because I wasn't a girl. After I left for college, my grandma told me even more. Before I was born, my parents were so sure I'd be a girl that they bought everything pink without even checking my gender on the ultrasound. for the first 6 months of my life. My mom dressed me in girls' clothes and called me by a girl's name. My dad enabled it. When word got out, my grandparents stepped in. They told my parents they were wrong to try raising me as something I wasn't without giving me a choice. My grandparents are surprisingly open-minded for their generation, and they put their foot down. That ended the girl treatment. But instead of buying me new clothes, my parents gave me my brother's hand-me-downs until my grandparents noticed and stepped in again. Looking back, I realize my grandparents saved me from having an even worse childhood. I didn't learn most of this until these past couple of years, but it's made me even more grateful for them. My mom apparently struggled to call me by my real name for years because I wasn't the daughter she had dreamed of. My parents couldn't connect with me like they did with my brother. When my grandparents found out I wasn't getting treated the same way, they threatened to petition for guardianship of me. They had evidence of my parents' favoritism and neglect, and my parents backed down to avoid a public scandal. My parents stopped pretending to care a long time ago. Since I moved out, they barely interact with the family anymore. They've thrown themselves into work, partly because my grandparents forced them to contribute to my college, just like they did for my brother, but also because work seems to be their only escape. My grandma even suspects they've slept in their cars a few times, just to avoid coming home. I only see my parents at Christmas at my uncle's house, and even then they barely speak to me. It's like I no longer exist to them. Now that I'm living my best life away from them, they've stopped pretending I'm their son. The truth is they don't want me anymore. My grandma told me my old bedroom is exactly how I left it the day I moved out. My parents haven't touched it, but my brother's room is spotless, kept clean and ready for the day they hoped he'd come back home after college. Well, that day didn't come. My brother graduated, and my parents flew out to celebrate with him. I wasn't invited to go, not that. I could have afforded it anyway, but my grandparents went and gave me all the details. At the graduation party, my brother dropped the bombshell. He told them he wasn't coming back home. He had secured a job through an internship and found his own apartment. My dad was furious, and my mom completely broke down, crying and begging him to return, but my brother stood his ground. Over the past 2 years, my brother and I have reconnected a bit. He found my Reddit account and reached out to me. During our conversations, he admitted that our parents had put him through a lot as well. My mom had smothered him, especially when I wasn't around, and my dad had been harsh and demanding. Our parents had invested everything in him, and the fact that I ended up doing better academically broke them. And now, hearing that my brother wasn't coming back shattered them even more. My brother explained that being the favorite wasn't as great as it seemed. The constant pressure and control had messed him up. He admitted that he had bullied me when we were younger, and though he didn't excuse his actions, he said the favoritism had gone to his head. He had gone to counseling after moving out, which helped him realize just how toxic our parents were. He also told me about his girlfriend. They met in college, and she's in nursing school now, about a year away from graduating. He says she's amazing. I haven't met her yet, but the way he talks about her makes it clear how much she means to him. When my parents found out about his girlfriend, they didn't approve. My mom, who hadn't even met her, referred to her as a bad influence, using much worse language I won't repeat. My brother blew up at them for it. He made it clear that their opinions didn't matter to him anymore. Things escalated when my mom secretly hired a private investigator to dig into his girlfriend's background. She was probably hoping to find something negative, but it backfired. The investigator's report revealed that the girlfriend came from a good family, had no skeletons in her closet, and shared similar values with my brother. My mom couldn't complain about her, so she blamed her for stealing my brother away. When my brother found out about the private investigator, he confronted my parents, they argued, and my parents accused him of being ungrateful after everything they had done for him. He told them that being the favorite had been its own form of abuse. He said they had controlled and smothered him, so much that he nearly turned out just like them. Hearing that completely broke them. My brother told our grandparents about everything, and they arranged another family intervention. I joined via video call. My parents tried to ignore me during the call, but my brother insisted they acknowledge me. We all confronted them, my grandparents, my brother, and I made it clear that enough was enough. My parents had 2 sons, and they needed to treat us both with fairness and respect. My brother told them they had let something as ridiculous as wanting a daughter ruin their love for me from the very beginning. That's when my dad lost it. He yelled, "You want us to admit we messed up? Fine, we messed up. What do you want us to do? Go back in time? We're paying for part of his college too. What more does he want from us?" The intervention ended badly. My mom cried and gave me a half-hearted apology, but it didn't feel genuine. She spent much more time apologizing to my brother through the video call. He eventually told her to stop and go apologize to me like she meant it. That's when my dad grabbed the phone, shut it off, and told everyone to leave. Before leaving, my grandparents expressed their deep disappointment in my parents. They said maybe losing both sons would teach them a lesson about favoritism. Right now, my parents are not on speaking terms with the rest of the family. My grandma heard rumors that they might be planning to move. But they have a fully paid-off house and stable careers, so it doesn't make much sense. Then again, neither does most of what they've done. I doubt they'd welcome me if I tried to visit. After everything that's happened, I don't think I'd want to visit anyway. I'll admit that I'm still thankful to them for helping with my college expenses. Thanks to their financial contributions, my student loans are significantly reduced. But as parents, they failed. I think we can all agree on that.